Welcome to the Reed Flute. Find a comfortable position, take a slow, deep breath, and let the day gently fall away as we begin. The night had settled over the caravanserai like a blue cloak. Camels slept near the outer wall, their knees folded into the sand. A brass lamp burned in a niche, and its flame made the dust around it look almost golden. In the far corner, an old dervish sat with a reed flute across his lap, touching its smooth body as one might touch the hand of an old friend. Across from him sat a young copyist named Camel. Ink still darkened the edge of his thumb. He had come from the city after a quarrel in a school courtyard, where another man had corrected him in front of students. Since sunset, Camel had replayed the argument again and again, polishing clever replies he had not spoken. He did not want food. He did not want sleep. He wanted the room of the world to know he had been right. The dervish watched him for a while, then began with a tale Rumi carried across many hearts. A grammarian once boarded a small boat to cross a wide river. He wore a clean robe and a turban wound with care. Under his arm he carried books wrapped in cloth, because a man who loves his learning fears dust, dampness, and careless hands. The boatman was simple. His palms were cracked from rope and oar. His speech had the roughness of riverbanks and market talk. The river moved slowly at first. Moonlight lay across it in long broken pieces. The grammarian listened to the boatman speak and frowned. "My friend," he said, "have you ever studied grammar?" The boatman smiled without shame. "No, master. I know the wind, the current, and the price of bread. Grammar has not visited my house." The scholar sighed. "Then half your life has been wasted." The boatman lowered his eyes. He did not argue. The oar dipped into the dark water and rose again, silver along its edge. The scholar sat straighter, feeling the old comfort of being above another man. His books rested dry beside him. His answer had been clean. His place in the world seemed firm. Then clouds gathered. A wind came down from the hills. The river, which had been quiet as a sleeping animal, began to turn and lift. Water slapped the side of the boat. The scholar clutched his books. The boatman leaned into the oar, but the current had grown wild. He looked at the grammarian and called above the wind, "Master, have you ever learned to swim?" The scholar's face changed. "No," he said. "Then all your life may be wasted," said the boatman, "for the boat is sinking." The old dervish did not hurry after this. He let the river sound enter the caravanserai. Camel heard the camels breathing. He heard the little hiss of the lamp. He saw the scholar's careful robe, the boatman's wet hands, the books wrapped so well, and yet unable to keep a man afloat. The dervish lifted the nay, but did not play. "There is knowledge that wins arguments," he said softly, "and there is knowledge that carries a soul across water." Camel looked at his ink-stained thumb. All evening, he had held his cleverness like a bundle of books. He had wanted to return to the courtyard and make everyone see. But the ache under his ribs was not asking for victory. It was asking to be carried. He had known grammar. He had not known how to cross the river of being contradicted. Outside, the night wind moved along the gate and passed on. May you loosen the book you are clutching and learn what keeps the heart afloat. The river widened under the moon, and its dark water carried the night toward a lion who fought his own reflection. Past midnight, the caravanserai grew more still. A servant crossed the courtyard with a copper basin, and the water inside it trembled with a small piece of the moon. Camel watched that reflection break and return. His own mind was doing the same. One moment he felt ashamed of his anger. The next, he imagined standing before the man who had corrected him and making him bow. The old dervish saw the old lion awakening in him and spoke of a valley from Rumi's Masnavi. In that valley, a lion had made himself king over all the animals. Every morning, fear went out before him like a shadow. The deer did not graze freely. The ox lowered his head whenever the lion's roar rolled across the stones. Even the birds grew quiet when he passed beneath their branches. He did not merely want food. He wanted every creature to know that he was the strongest. The animals, tired of trembling, made an agreement. Each day, one would go to the lion, and he would stop hunting the rest. It was a bitter arrangement, but fear often bargains with power when it cannot yet see another road. One day, the turn came to a small hare. The hare walked slowly. He let the sun climb. He stopped near thyme bushes. He listened to the insects in the dry grass. By the time he reached the lion, the king's mane was lifted with rage. "Why are you late?" the lion roared. The hare trembled in just the right way. "My lord," he said, "I was coming with another hare, larger and fatter than I." But another lion appeared on the road. He seized my companion and said he was the true king of this valley. The lion's eyes narrowed. "Another lion?" "Yes, my lord. He spoke your name with contempt. He waits in a stone well and claims the valley." The lion rose, his pride burning hotter than hunger. It was not the lost meal that maddened him. It was the thought of another voice saying, "I am greater." The hare led him across the valley to an old well. Moonlight rested inside it, deep and still. The lion looked down. In the water, he saw a lion staring back. His own mane, his own eyes, his own rage. Beside that lion, reflected faintly, was the hare. The lion roared. The well roared back. There are insults that come from others, and there are insults that the self throws into the world so it can fight them. The lion did not know the difference. He leapt at the rival in the water and vanished into the depth. The valley became quiet. The hare returned, not with a sword, not with claws, but with the strange victory of one who understood that pride can be led by its own noise. The dervish let the tail rest in the lamp glow. Camel looked toward the dark basin across the courtyard. It was only water, yet it held the moon and could have held his face if he leaned over it. He thought of the man in the school courtyard. Had that man truly wanted to humiliate him? Or had Camel looked down into the well of his own pride and seen an enemy made from reflection? The lion did not die because the hare was strong, the dervish said. He fell because he trusted his anger more than his seeing. Camel's shoulders lowered. He remembered the moment of the correction. The other man had spoken plainly, perhaps too plainly, but the roar afterward had been Camel's. The imagined contempt, the secret duel, the need to prove himself before invisible witnesses, these had come from the well. The reed flute lay hollow in the dervish's hands. It had no mane to defend. Perhaps that was why breath could pass through it. May you step back from the well before striking at your own reflection. The well darkened again, and the night bent toward a feast where a patched coat received more honor than the soul inside it. The night needed a small smile, so the dervish allowed the next tale to enter softly, with dust on its slippers. The lamp had burned lower, and moths moved in slow circles around it. Camel had stopped clenching his hands, but the wish to be seen still sat in him like a guest who had not yet taken off his shoes. In one town, the dervish said, Nasreddin Haja was invited to a feast. The house was large, with a courtyard paved in pale stone. Lanterns hung from ropes overhead. Pilaf steamed in copper trays. Apricots, almonds, and roasted onions scented the night air. Men arrived in fine robes, greeting one another with the heavy politeness of those who want their arrival noticed. Nasreddin came in his everyday coat. It was patched at the elbow. The hem had known mud. His turban leaned slightly to one side. He stepped through the gate and smiled, but no one hurried to greet him. A servant glanced at him and pointed toward a place near the door. The host looked past him. The guest spoke over him as if his patched sleeve had made him thin as smoke. Nasreddin sat quietly. No one offered him the best rice. No one poured sherbet into his cup. The stories he began were not heard. After a while, he rose and went home. He opened his chest and took out his finest coat. It was lined with soft cloth and trimmed with fur. Its sleeves shone under lamplight. He put it on, straightened his turban, and returned to the feast. This time, the gate changed its manners. Servants bowed. The host came quickly, smiling with both hands open. "Haja, welcome, welcome. Why did you not come sooner? Sit here, near me." A place was made for him among the honored guests. Rice was piled before him. Meat was placed on his plate. Sweets arrived. Sherbet glowed rose-colored in a glass cup. Nasreddin looked at the food, then lifted the edge of his fine coat and dipped the sleeve into the dish. "Eat my coat," he said. The guest stared. He dipped the other sleeve toward the sherbet. "Drink my coat." The host frowned. "Haja, what are you doing?" Nasreddin looked innocent. "When I came without this coat, no one saw me. Now that I wear it, everyone feeds me. Clearly the feast is for the coat." The courtyard grew quiet, and then some laughed because laughter was easier than shame. The host lowered his eyes. The coat, shining and silent, had told the truth better than an angry speech. In the caravanserai, Camel did not laugh loudly, but his mouth softened. He knew that feast. Not the courtyard, not the pilaf, not the fur-trimmed coat. He knew the hunger to be recognized by the room. He had spent years learning beautiful phrases, rare arguments, careful quotations. Some were true, some were useful, but some had become his fine coat. When people praised them, he felt fed. When they ignored them, he felt starved. The dervish adjusted the lamp wick with 2 fingers. "A coat may be made of wool," he said, "or reputation, or cleverness, or the need to have the final word." Camel looked at his own robe. It was not costly, but his pride had worn richer garments than any merchant. He remembered how often he had entered a gathering already listening for his own name. How often he had spoken not to serve the truth, but to hear the room turn toward him. In Nasreddin's tale, after the feast, some say the Haja went home and hung the fine coat on a peg. He thanked it solemnly for eating so well. Then he put on his patched one and slept comfortably. May you know the difference between being fed and having your coat admired. The feast lamps dimmed behind Nasreddin, and the night passed to Basra, where Rabia refused to build her holiness around an enemy. Basra came into the night with its warm alleys and the smell of river mud after heat. The houses leaned close to one another. Lamps burned behind latticed windows. Somewhere, a child coughed and was comforted. In a small room with a reed mat and a clay cup, Rabia sat awake while the city slept. A scholar came to her near the late hour, carrying the restlessness of a man who had sharpened many opinions and still found no peace in them. His beard was combed. His robe was clean. He had spent the evening in argument, defending the righteous against the wicked, the pure against the impure, the correct against the mistaken. His words had one admiration, yet his heart felt like a room full of smoke. Rabia received him without ceremony. There was no cushion of honor, no special lamp, only the reed mat and the stillness around her. The scholar asked, "Mother, do you love the Lord?" Rabia looked at him as one looks at a child asking whether the sun gives light. "Yes," she said. "Then do you hate Satan?" Rabia was silent for a moment. Outside, a donkey brayed far down the lane. Then the city returned to quiet. "I am so occupied with love," she said, "that I have no room left for hatred." The scholar frowned. He had expected a clean answer, one that would divide the world in a way he could approve. He had built much of his identity around correct opposition. He knew who was wrong. He knew who should be refuted. He knew which names to reject and which to praise. His heart stood on a pulpit even when his body sat on a mat. Rabia saw this and did not scold him. She poured water into the clay cup and handed it to him. "Drink," she said. He drank. "Can this cup hold more while it is full?" she asked. "No." "Then empty it of smoke." The scholar lowered his eyes. The water was plain, but his throat received it as if it had traveled from a hidden spring. For the first time that evening, he noticed how tired he was. Hatred had disguised itself as vigilance. The need to be right had disguised itself as devotion. He had been carrying enemies like torches, and the torches had burned his own hands. Rabia turned back to her silence. She did not ask him to abandon discernment. She did not tell him that falsehood and truth were the same. She simply showed him that a heart crowded with the pleasure of being against cannot become spacious enough for love. In the caravanserai, Camel listened as if the bazaar room had opened inside him. He remembered the man from the courtyard and felt the secret sweetness with which he had made him an enemy. It had been unpleasant, yes, but also strangely satisfying. As long as the other man was wrong, Camel could remain upright in his own eyes. As long as he rehearsed the injury, he did not have to feel the deeper tremor, the fear of not being seen. The dervish poured a little water from a leather flask into Camel's cup. "Many people call it love of truth," he said, "when it is love of standing above another." Camel drank. The water was cool from the night air. It moved through him without argument. In Rabia's room, the scholar sat until the first thinning of darkness. When he left, he had fewer sentences ready on his tongue. The alley did not become brighter, but it became less crowded. He had laid down some torches. "May you leave enough room in the cup of your heart for love to sit down." Basra's quiet cup passed from hand to hand, and the night rose toward Adder's birds beside a pool of clean water. The old dervish's next story opened in a low marsh under the stars. Reeds stood in black clusters. Water held the moon in broken pieces. The birds of Adder's gathering had come together because the hoopoe had called them toward the simurg, but each bird carried a private excuse like a seed hidden under the tongue. The duck stepped forward with wet feet and a spotless breast. He moved with the solemn pride of one who had always lived near water and believed that nearness had made him pure. Drops shone on his feathers in the lamp-like moonlight. "Oh, hoopoe," said the duck, "why should I cross deserts and valleys? Water is my prayer rug. I wash in it. I float on it. I dive beneath it. It is clean, and I am clean because I remain with it. Let other birds choke on dust. My path is this pool." The other birds murmured. Some admired him. Cleanliness has its own beauty, and the duck knew how to display it. He shook one wing, and droplets scattered like tiny pearls. The hoopoe regarded him with patient eyes. "Friend of water," he said, "you speak of purity, but listen to what hides beneath your words. If the pool makes you humble, stay and be blessed. If it makes you despise the dust on other wings, the pool has become a mirror for pride." The duck tucked his head closer to his body. "Is water not better than dust?" "Water may cleanse the feather," said the hoopoe. "It does not cleanse the self that says, 'Look how clean I am.'" The marsh quieted. A frog sounded once, then stopped. The duck looked at the other birds. The hoopoe with his desert crest, the sparrow with rough feathers, the falcon smelling of the royal glove, the owl carrying night in his eyes. He had called them dusty in his heart. He had taken his pool as proof that he was nearer to truth. The hoopoe stepped into the water. Mud clouded around his feet. "See," he said, "even clean water holds silt when stirred. Do not worship the surface." The duck lowered his beak. Beneath the moon's reflection, the pool was not as clear as he had imagined. Leaves rotted at the bottom. Small creatures moved unseen. The water still gave life, but it was not a throne from which to judge the world. In the caravanserai, Camel remembered how he had loved correctness. Clean lines of thought, proper words. Faultless references. He had looked at clumsy speech and felt superior. He had heard uncertain minds and silently stepped away from them as the duck stepped from dust. Yet beneath his polished answers, silt had moved. Anger, vanity, fear of being ordinary. The dervish picked up the nay and held it toward the lamp. Its surface was plain, not polished like ivory, not jeweled, only a cut reed made useful by emptiness. Being right can become a pool, he said. At first it washes confusion. Then the self leans over it to admire its own clean feathers. Kamal breathed out slowly. He did not want to become careless with truth. But perhaps truth did not need his pride to protect it. Perhaps the cleanest thing in a room was not always the person who won the point, but the one who could kneel in dust without contempt. In Adder's gathering, the duck did not fly at once. He stood at the edge of the pool for a long time. Then, quietly, he stepped onto the muddy bank where the other birds waited. May you love the clear water without using it to look down on dusty wings. The duck's wet footprints faded into the bank, and the knight followed a tiny mouse who believed he was leading a camel. The caravanserai had entered the hour when men turn in their sleep and speak half-words to dreams. Kamal heard one traveler murmur a name, then fall quiet again. The old dervish leaned against the wall, his face lined with lamplight. He spoke now of a road where pride was small but did not know it. A mouse once found the loose end of a camel's rein dragging in the dust. The camel was large, patient, and accustomed to burdens. Its feet knew the desert. Its eyes had watched more horizons than the mouse could imagine. But the mouse saw the rein and felt a thrill pass through his tiny body. He took the rein in his paws and began walking. The camel, mild and amused, followed. The mouse swelled with importance. His whiskers lifted. He looked left and right, hoping other creatures would see. A lizard paused on a stone. A crow tilted its head. The mouse walked taller. See how I lead this great beast, he thought. I must be stronger than I knew. The camel said nothing. Sand whispered under its broad feet. They crossed a plain, passed thorn bushes, and came to a river. The water was not especially deep for the camel, but to the mouse it was a moving wall. He stopped at the edge. His paws trembled. Foam curled near the stones. The camel lowered its head. Why have you stopped, leader? The mouse tried to keep his dignity. The river is dangerous, he said. The camel stepped into the water. It rose only to his knees. He looked back. Come, he said. The water is shallow. For you, said the mouse, it is shallow. For me, it is death. The camel's eyes softened. Then do not boast of leading camels, he said. If you are a mouse, be a mouse with honesty. There is no shame in smallness. The shame is in holding a rein and imagining yourself master of the caravan. The mouse released the rein. His paws felt empty at first, then strangely relieved. The camel knelt and let him climb onto its back. Together they crossed the river, each in the truth of its own size. The dervish smiled faintly when he finished. Kamal looked toward the gate, where a camel slept with its long neck folded like a question. He thought of the school courtyard. He had held one end of a rein, a phrase from a book, a correction, a point of doctrine. Because others had listened, he had imagined himself the guide of the whole caravan. Then one man had brought him to a river he could not cross, a question he had not considered, a weakness in his argument, and terror had risen under his pride. The mouse was not wrong to hold the rein, the dervish said. He was wrong to forget his size. Kamal felt the mercy of that. He did not have to hate his learning. He only had to stop making it larger than his soul. A man may know one path through the sand and still not know the river. He may lead for a little while and then need to be carried. The old dervish passed his hand over the reed flute. The reed is small, he said, but because it does not pretend to be the breath breath can use it. In Rumi's tale, the mouse did not become less alive after being humbled. He became safer. He learned where his paws were useful and where the camel's back was mercy. May you release the rain when the river shows the true size of the self. The camel crossed without hurry, and the night drifted toward four travelers arguing over the same bunch of grapes. The night turned toward a roadside in where four travelers had taken shelter from wind. A lamp hung from a beam. Their cloaks were dusty from different roads, and each carried the loneliness of a different tongue. One was Persian, one was Arab, one was Turkish, one was Greek. They had little money between them, only a few coins placed on a wooden table. Hunger had made them irritable. Travel had made them proud. Each man wanted to decide what the coins should buy. The Persian said, "Let us buy anger." The Arab struck the table. "No, I want a nab." The Turk frowned. "You always think your desire should rule. I say use them." The Greek shook his head. "You are all wrong. We should buy istafil." Their voices rose. The lamp swung slightly from the beam. Outside, the wind moved sand against the door. The men leaned closer, each defending his word as if his honor lived inside its sound. They did not know that all four words meant grapes. A boy near the hearth watched them with wide eyes. To him, the quarrel seemed enormous. Four grown men, each hungry, each wanting sweetness, each ready to fight because the sweetness had been named differently. Then a wise passerby entered, a man who knew their languages. He listened for a moment and smiled, not with mockery, but with the sadness of one who has seen whole cities do the same. He took their coins and went out. The four travelers continued muttering. The Persian called the Arab stubborn. The Arab called the Turk ignorant. The Turk accused the Greek of arrogance. The Greek sighed as if surrounded by fools. Each man felt alone with the truth. After a little while, the passerby returned carrying a bunch of grapes. They were dark and full, their skins holding the lamp glow. He set them on the table. The Persian reached first. "Anger." The Arab laughed. "Inab." The Turk smiled despite himself. "Use 'em." The Greek lifted one grape between finger and thumb. "Istafil." Their quarrel dissolved into chewing. Sweetness entered all four mouths without caring which word had defended it. The boy by the hearth laughed softly, and even the lamp seemed steadier. In the caravanserai, Camel's face grew quiet. He remembered the argument from the school courtyard. How much had been truth, and how much had been the love of his own wording? How often had he fought for the cup because another man called it by a different name? He had felt righteous, but perhaps both of them had been hungry for the same grapes. The dervish looked at him kindly. "Words are vessels," he said. "The ego drinks the vessel and forgets the water." Camel turned this over slowly. He had spent years copying fine lines into manuscripts. Words mattered. Careless words could mislead. But tonight the tale showed another danger. A man can polish language until he would rather be right in sound than nourished in truth. The old dervish reached into his cloth bundle and brought out a small cluster of raisins. He placed them between them on the mat. They were wrinkled, dark, and sweet with stored sun. Camel took one. It dissolved slowly on his tongue. No argument was needed. In the roadside inn, the four travelers finished the grapes and found themselves less foreign to one another. Their languages remained different. Their hunger had been one. May you taste the grape before fighting all night over its name. The sweetness of the grapes lingered, and the road carried the night to a wrestling yard where a student had not learned the final throw. The old dervish next opened a tale from Sadi, whose garden of stories often smelled of king's courts, dusty roads, and the sweat of ordinary discipline. This one took place in a wrestling yard near a palace, where the earth had been packed hard by many feet. Torches burned along the wall. Men gathered in a ring, eager for contest, eager for the clean thrill of seeing one body prove itself against another. An old wrestling master had trained a young man for years. The youth was strong, graceful, and quick. His shoulders widened, his balance sharpened. He learned grip after grip, turn after turn, the hidden use of weight, the patient art of waiting for another man to lean too far. The master taught him 359 holds. But one hold he kept back. The youth did not know this at first. He loved his master. He bowed to him. He carried his sandals. He listened, but praise began to gather around him. Men in the yard said, "No one moves like him." Boys imitated his stance. Even palace guards spoke his name. Slowly, admiration entered him like sweet wine. One evening, before the king, the young wrestler said, "My master is old now. Whatever he knows, I know. Let me wrestle him, and the court will see." The old master heard this without anger. His beard was white. His hands were scarred. He had seen many young men grow drunk on the applause that follows strength. The king agreed. Torches were lit. The circle opened. The young wrestler stepped in with shining confidence. The old master stepped in quietly. They gripped. At first, the youth moved beautifully. He turned, pressed, shifted, and tried one hold after another. The crowd murmured. The king leaned forward. The old master yielded just enough, resisted just enough, like a tree that knows wind. Then, in one breath, the old man used the hold he had never taught. The young wrestler rose, lost the earth beneath him, and fell onto his back. Dust lifted around him. The yard went silent. The old master stepped away and bowed. The youth lay staring at the night sky. He had known almost everything. Almost everything had not been enough to protect him from pride. The king asked the master why he had hidden one hold from his student. The master answered, "I held it for this day. A teacher gives knowledge, but he must sometimes keep a small medicine against ingratitude." In the caravanserai, Camel felt the dust of the wrestling yard in his own mouth. He had learned much from teachers whose names he now used as steps for his own rising. How quickly the student wants the master's place. How quietly the heart begins to think, "Whatever he knows, I know." The dervish touched the reed flute to his forehead. "A man who must be seen as complete," he said, "cannot be taught by what remains hidden." Camel understood. In the courtyard argument, what had wounded him most was not the point itself. It was the exposure of one unlearned hold. A gap, a missing turn, a place where his knowledge did not yet reach. If he had bowed inwardly, the gap might have become a door. Instead, he had treated it as an insult. In Sadi's yard, the young wrestler rose slowly. Dust clung to his hair. The crowd waited to see whether humiliation would harden him or open him. He walked to the old master, bowed low, and kissed his hand. In that moment, he learned more than a throw. The torches burned steadily along the wall. May you bless the hidden hold that lays pride gently on its back. The dust of the wrestling yard settled, and the knight took the road to Mecca, where Bayezid met a poor man beside the path. The night road turned toward pilgrimage. Stars lay thick above the desert, and the wind carried the faint scent of camel wool, dry grass, and distant fires. Bayezid of Bistam walked with a pilgrim's poverty, his face turned toward Mecca. His sandals were worn. His water skin hung at his side. In his pouch, he carried a little money for the road. He had set out with longing. Yet even longing can gather a secret pride. A man on pilgrimage may begin by seeking the friend and then, without noticing, begin to admire himself as a seeker. He may imagine how people will look at him when he returns, dusted by holy distance, carrying stories from sacred roads. On the way, Bayezid met a poor man sitting beside the path. The man's robe was torn. His eyes were clear. He greeted Bayezid and asked, "Where are you going?" "To the house of God," Bayezid replied. How much money do you carry? Bayezid told him. The poor man held out his hand. Give it to me, he said, and circle around me 7 times. Then return home. A lesser pilgrim might have grown angry. He might have said, "Who are you to stand in the way of my devotion?" He might have defended the road, the right, the intention, the correctness of his journey. But Bayezid heard something in the poor man's voice that did not belong to begging alone. The man continued, "The house you seek is built of stone. The one you seek has looked into the heart of a servant. Do not step over a living need while dreaming of arrival." The desert became very quiet. Bayezid looked toward the unseen road ahead, then at the man before him. His heart trembled, for he understood that the poor man had placed a mirror in his path. Was he traveling to be emptied, or to be seen as one who had traveled? Was he seeking nearness, or a story about himself? Bayezid gave him the money. Then he walked around him with humility, not because the poor man's body had become a shrine of stone, but because mercy had interrupted pride. Each circle loosened something. The first loosened his plan. The second, his image of himself. The third, his need to complete what others praised. By the 7th, the road to Mecca had entered the place where he stood. Some tell the tale differently. Some say Bayezid continued his journey afterward. Some say he returned home. The heart of the story is not in the map. It is in the moment when a holy plan bowed before a living truth. In the caravanserai, Camel listened with unease. His own pilgrimage had been through books, debates, schools, and teachers. He too had stepped over living needs while protecting the nobility of his path. A friend had looked tired, and he had corrected his phrasing. A student had asked a simple question, and he had answered in a way that made himself shine. A poor man of the heart had sat by his road many times, and Camel had walked past in search of a more impressive destination. The dervish's eyes were half closed. The ego can make even the road to God into a procession for itself, he said. Camel felt the words fall without cruelty. The lamp beside them had no audience, yet it gave light. The reed flute did not ask who admired its emptiness. Bayezid's poor man remained seated under the stars, no longer merely poor, no longer merely a test. He had become a gate where the pilgrim's pride had to lower its head. May you not step over the living heart in order to be seen walking a holy road. The pilgrim's circles faded into desert dust, and the night returned to Baghdad, where Junayd learned when to speak and when to stay hidden. Baghdad's night entered with the murmur of the Tigris. Lamps trembled along the river. The market had closed, but the city still breathed behind wooden screens and courtyard walls. In a modest room near the old quarter, young Junayd sat with his teacher, Sari al-Sakati, a man whose silence had weight. People had begun asking Junayd to speak in public. He was learned. His words were clear. His presence gathered attention without effort. Yet each time they asked, he stepped back. Some thought him shy. Some thought him proud in reverse, hiding so others would praise his humility. Even the refusal to be seen can become another garment if the heart secretly admires how plain it looks. One evening, Sari said to him, "Speak to the people." Junayd lowered his head. "I do not see myself fit." Sari watched him carefully. A teacher hears not only words, but the breath beneath them. Time passed. The request came again. Junayd refused again. He feared speaking from the self. He feared the sweetness of eyes turned toward him. He knew that a pulpit can become a mirror more dangerous than polished bronze. Then one night, Junayd dreamed of the prophet, who told him to speak. Before dawn, Junayd went to Sari and said, "I will speak." Sari smiled. "You would not accept from me," he said, "but you accepted from that presence." Junayd trembled. There was no rebuke in the words, only recognition. The command had come from beyond praise, beyond reputation, beyond the nervous self that says, "Am I worthy? Am I admired? Am I safe?" Now the matter was no longer about being seen. It was service. When Junayd first spoke, the room filled. Men leaned in. Some wept. Some sat with eyes closed. His words were not loud, but they traveled. Unknown to him, Sari stood behind a pillar, hidden from the gathering, listening like a gardener listening for water beneath soil. Afterward, someone told Junayd that Sari had been there. Junayd went to his teacher, troubled. "Master, why did you hide?" Sari answered, "So that you would not speak to please me, and so that I would not stand where people might praise my student and secretly praise me through him." The room became quiet. Both teacher and student were being guarded from the same subtle hunger. Junayd from wanting to shine, Sari from wanting to be known as the lamp behind the lamp. How fine the ego's thread can be. It can enter speech and silence, pulpit and pillar, refusal and obedience. In the caravanserai, Camel bowed his head. He had thought the need to be seen lived only in speaking, arguing, displaying knowledge. But the tale showed something more delicate. Even withdrawal could whisper, "Notice how humble I am." Even service could become a hidden request for applause. The old dervish looked toward the reed flute. "The reed does not choose the song," he said. "It waits for breath. When breath comes, it does not ask who is listening." Camel remembered times he had remained silent not from wisdom, but to be asked again. He remembered speaking not because words were needed, but because attention was near. He remembered helping a teacher and hoping others would know who had helped. His ego had stood on pulpits and behind pillars. In Baghdad, Junayd learned to speak when called and be quiet when not called. Sari learned to hide even as guidance from praise. Between them, a clear space opened, where teaching could pass without being owned. May you speak when breath is given, and rest when silence is the truer service. The pillar cast a long shadow behind the lamp, and the night moved toward Shiraz, where Hafiz listened at the tavern door. Shiraz came again near the thinning of night, fragrant with roses hidden behind walls. The city's respectable doors were closed. The mosque lamps were low. At the edge of a lane, a tavern door gave out a warmer light, gold and wavering, touching the stones where dust and spilled water had dried together. In the world of Hafiz's songs, the tavern is often less a place than a mercy wearing a rough name. Men who had grown proud of clean sleeves were sometimes sent there by a wisdom that knew how pride hates strange thresholds. A preacher passed that door one night, holding his robe carefully away from the damp stones. He heard laughter inside. He smelled wine. He saw a poor musician asleep against the wall with a reed pipe in his lap. The preacher's face tightened. Hafiz stood nearby under a vine, listening to the night. The preacher said, "How can men seek truth in such a place? The righteous path is clear, yet they choose disgrace." Hafiz did not answer at once. He watched a tavern keeper come to the door and place a bowl of soup beside the sleeping musician. The keeper did not wake him. He only covered the man's feet with a torn cloth and returned inside. The preacher looked away, as if kindness from the wrong doorway disturbed the order of his thoughts. Hafiz said, "Tell me, friend, if a lamp burns in a ruined house, should we reject the light because the wall is cracked?" The preacher frowned. "Wine is wine. Sin is sin." Hafiz nodded. "And pride is pride, even when it smells of rose water." The words were gentle, but they entered sharply. The preacher had expected agreement or argument. Instead, he had been shown the tavern inside his own chest, the noisy room where he drank from the cup of being correct, then staggered home calling others impure. The tavern keeper opened the door again. Seeing the preacher, he bowed. No mockery, no challenge. He offered a cup of water. The preacher hesitated. His hand wanted to refuse because refusal would protect his image. His thirst wanted to receive. At last, thirst won. He drank. Hafiz smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "the friend sends water from a door we would rather condemn." The lane quieted. The preacher did not enter the tavern. The tale does not need him to. It was enough that for one breath, he stopped needing the world arranged so that he could stand above it. He returned home with his robe still clean and his certainty less stiff. In the caravanserai, Camel felt dawn approaching though the sky remained dark. He knew the preacher's robe. He had carried it in schools, markets, family rooms. He had refused wisdom when it came from someone he did not respect. He had ignored kindness because it arrived from a doorway his pride had already named unworthy. The dervish lifted the nay and blew a faint note. It was rough at first, then clear. "A reed may grow beside muddy water," he said. "Still, the breath can make it sing." Camel looked at the sleeping men around him. One snored softly. One smelled of sweat and road dust. One had muttered in his dream. Every one of them had become a tavern door of some kind, a place he might judge before receiving what was offered. In Shiraz, the preacher walked away slowly. Behind him, the tavern light fell on the musicians' covered feet. No one applauded. No one won. The night simply became less divided. May you receive the cup of water even when it is offered from the door your pride mistrusts. The tavern lamp grew small behind the vine, and the last darkness led to a door where the word "I" had to grow quiet before entering. The final hour before dawn arrived without a sound. The lamp in the caravanserai had become a small blue flame with a gold tip. Beyond the gate, the eastern sky held a pale promise. Not yet sunrise, only the thought of it. Camel sat with his back against the wall. The argument that had kept him awake no longer filled the whole room of his mind. It was still there, but smaller, like a coal covered with ash. The old dervish took the reed flute in both hands. Before playing, he told one last tale from Rumi, simple enough to be carried by a child, deep enough to tire the pride of kings. A lover came to the door of the friend. It was night. The road behind him was long. Dust clung to his robe. His feet ached. He had crossed alleys, fields, and silence to reach that threshold. A lamp burned inside. He could see a thin line of gold beneath the door. He knocked. A voice from within asked, "Who is there?" The lover straightened. His heart rose in his throat. "It is I," he said. The door did not open. The voice answered, "This house has no room for me and you." The lover stood in the dark, stunned. He had expected welcome. He had imagined embrace, recognition, perhaps tears. Instead, the door remained closed, and the line of light beneath it seemed thinner than before. He went away. The road received him again. He wandered through seasons. Summer burned the pride in his speech. Winter cooled the fever of his self-importance. Hunger sat with him. Silence sat longer. He learned how often his love had been a hidden demand to be seen loving. He had wanted the friend, yes, but he had also wanted to arrive as someone. The faithful one, the wounded one, the one who had traveled far, the one whose knock deserved an answer. Years passed in the old tale, though in the heart such years may happen in one night. At last, the lover returned. His robe was older. His steps were quieter. He stood before the same door. The same line of light shone beneath it. He knocked. The voice asked again, "Who is there?" This time, the lover did not stand tall. He did not gather his story. He did not display his journey like a certificate before the unseen. He answered, "It is you." The door opened. No trumpet sounded. No crowd gathered. The tale does not need to describe the room. Some doors open only when the one who enters no longer plans to admire himself inside. The old dervish's face was calm in the faint light. Camel felt the whole night gather into this door. The grammarian losing his books to the river, the lion leaping at reflection, Nasreddin feeding his coat, Rabia making room in the cup, the duck leaving clean pride for dusty road, the mouse releasing the camel's rein, the travelers tasting grapes beyond language, the wrestler learning the hidden throw, Bayezid circling the poor man, Junayd speaking without owning the pulpit, Hafiz receiving water from a mistrusted door. All had led to this, the ego knocking and calling itself love, wisdom, purity, devotion, service, injury, or truth. Again and again, the door had waited for a softer answer. Kamal took the argument he had carried all night and let it rest beside the lamp. He did not decide that he had been wrong in every way. He did not pretend that correction had not hurt. But the need to return and be seen as right had lost its sharp crown. Perhaps he could speak tomorrow with less hunger. Perhaps he could listen. Perhaps he could let truth enter without demanding that it wear his face. The old dervish finally played the ney. Its sound was hollow and tender, the cry of a reed cut from its bed, longing not for applause, but for the breath that made it useful. Dawn touched the caravanserai gate. A camel stirred. Somewhere a bird began with one small note. May the eye that knocks so loudly grow quiet enough for the door to open. The reed flute's last breath thinned into morning, and the restless ego loosened its hand around sleep. Thank you for spending this hour with the reed flute. If this brought you a moment of peace, consider subscribing. Rest well and sleep deep.